Manana si Jesus, Imina 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. I understand when we broke yesterday, I was with Senator Tello Taitagui, but at this time, colleagues, I'm going to address the author of the bill that we're on, 135-35 CR. Senator Mary Camacho, you are recognized.
Sidus Mahasi, Madam Speaker, as the author of Bill number 135-35 COR, I respectfully request that I be allowed to set aside this bill so that I can address some issues. Thank you.
On that motion, without any objections, motion carries. Colleagues, next on the agenda, we have Bill number 126-35 LS. Senator Mary Torres, that is your bill. You are recognized at this time.
Sidus Mahasi, Madam Speaker. Bill number 126-35 LS, I move, Madam Speaker, to place Bill number 126-35 LS as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation and Procurement in the third reading file, and I request that I be allowed to discuss it briefly.
Sijos Masi, Senator Torres, please proceed. And if you can just note for the record, read the title.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, we have many problems on our island right now. And the legislation that I introduced with 126-35 is a type of measure that aims to eliminate one of the barriers, particularly to a situation that has been more visible on island, our Guam homeless situation. This bill aims to eliminate a major barrier that will make it easier for these homeless people to obtain identification that they need. Identification is one of those things that is a first step into obtaining help. The most recent point-in-time count report that was conducted shows that a number of homeless individuals were citing lack of identification as a barrier to employment, and that this reason doubled between 2017 and 2018. What Bill 126-35 does is it essentially provides that the Department of Revenue and Taxation establish a process based on two simple requirements. Number one, that the fee of $25 for homeless individuals be waived. And two, that it allows the DRT to come up with an alternative verification to establish proof of residence. What I want to point out to you, Madam Speaker, and to those that may be listening is that when you look at the requirements for the Department of Revenue and Taxation to receive an ID card, there are many, many requirements, but one of the main obstacles to a person who is homeless would be, one, they don't have, they can't afford the fee, the $25 fee, and two, they don't have a residence and can't establish proof of residency. So what we are trying to do in this bill is we're allowing for DRT to set up a program similar to what's been done in other jurisdictions to allow for an alternative to proof of residency. I think it's important, sometimes to just go back to the basics of why you would want to do something to help the homeless people. And the basics of this legislation, Bill 126, is that we have a growing number. Our number of homeless population is continuing to grow. in fact, the data from the Guam Homeless Coalition's point-in-time count of 2019 shows that the number of homeless people on Guam grew from 13.2% to 16%. And the number of people whose primary nighttime residence, which is not designed to accommodate a regular sleeping area, increased from 727 in 2018 to 765 in 2019. These homeless people are oftentimes without personal identification documents, as the transient and unstable nature of homelessness increases the likelihood that their documents have been stolen or lost. And while identification is necessary for obtaining employment or certain public benefits, the fees for acquiring or replacing the personal ID are often prohibitive as a homeless individual, as a person who is homeless. So what this bill does is it simply attempts to remove a barrier that prevents many of our homeless people from obtaining identification documents. And the need to do this is simple. Most of us understand that usually the first step in any effort that we try to do is providing ID. Identification is usually the basis for us to make application, whether it's application for government services, for welfare services, for public housing, but especially for employment. And we know that in poverty and in people who have had situations where they've been incarcerated and are looking for a fresh start, identification is the first thing that they need to begin that journey to not only righting their situation, but becoming more sufficient and just being in a position to help themselves. So I encourage everybody to please come on board and support 126-35. We have daunting issues in our government, but this is one step in a very, very practical way to address how to help people help themselves. And before I go, I'd like to proffer one amendment, Madam Speaker, to Bill 126. And the amendment that I'd like to make is on page 2, to amend section 3 of the bill to read, and this has to do with the effective date, to read, the exceptions process shall be established within 180 calendar days from the date of enactment. The reason for this is the Department of Revenue and Taxation requested that they be allowed enough time to work with organizations to help come up with the criteria for alternative proofs of residence. And 180 days was the prescribed timeline for revenue and taxation.
So you want that on section 3, but do you have a copy of that, Senator Torres?
I do, and I'll get
Maybe
it
you can
circulated.
just give it to the Sergeant of Arms so that we can have copies disseminated? Or
Yes,
is there
ma'am.
already copies? Does everybody have a copy?
I'll get it to you immediately.
Yes, while they're making copies, because it's the time, I'm going to give the opportunity for Senator Castro and then Senator Tello.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 126, and I also want to publicly commend the author. This measure, in my opinion, Madam Speaker, helps to establish a stronger foundation for government data, information that can be inputted into a database with some type of integrity. You know, I read this measure once, twice, 3 times yesterday, and it took me back to when I was working for the previous administration, and it was one of the struggles we had at the Guam Memorial Hospital when addressing those folks who had services that were delivered for which they couldn't pay. And you may be surprised to learn that there's a percentage of those folks who receive the services at the hospital for which they provide an alias or an erroneous address, or in some instances, Madam Speaker, don't even provide any form of identification, therefore nullifying any real opportunity to collect. I also want to commend the author on Bill 126 for including in the bill a provision that validates or establishes a means by which we validate the identity and extending that opportunity to a service provider. In my humble opinion, it's an additional level of credibility that will also go towards ensuring the integrity of the data that's to be collected by the government. In summary of my first point, I think almost everyone in here can acknowledge the importance of and how vital data is for planning and analysis, especially when applying for and managing the delivery of government services, whether it's local or federal. Madam Speaker, also to be very practical about it, I reached back to a colleague of mine in the Guam public library system, and I asked her to validate if in fact the Guam ID is required to get a library card. And so you can't even get a library card, and maybe there's an alternative way to secure one, but you can't even get a library card. I'm talking about our homeless youth, or any youth for that matter, without a valid government ID or a form of identification that is acceptable to that government entity. To the previous speaker's point, I want to underscore that advocacy that assists our homeless and homeless youth attain a valid or government-recognized identification is so critical for their transition, Madam Speaker, back to becoming a successful contributing member of this community. I actually think that this provision 126, by allowing them to attain a government ID, it in itself is a homeless prevention strategy, because it allows our homeless, and again, most especially our homeless youth, to reconnect with their school, work, or government entity. By passing this piece, Bill 126, we will remove, as a previous speaker mentioned, as the author of the bill had mentioned, we will be removing one more barrier between our homeless and homeless youth and the greater opportunities that lie in front of them. I do want to add, while it does not affect a great percentage of this population, it could make a world of a difference for that one person who needs a fresh start. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Si Jules Masi, Senator Castro. Senator Tello, you're recognized on the main motion.
Si Jules Masi, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, Bill 126-35, which creates the Homeless Youth and Families Identification Act. I just wanted to read for the record the comments made by the Department of Revenue and Taxation. The section here where, given that there are 765 homeless individuals on island, this act could cost the government of Guam $19,125 to fund this program. It also indicates the Department of Revenue and Tax supports the intent of this bill to help the homeless. However, there may be additional barriers which will prevent individuals to obtain Guam identification card, even if it's provided free of charge. Examples of such barriers, and Madam Speaker as well, GURA had made these comments as well in their testimony. Example of these barriers include the cost to obtain an official birth certificate, verification of an address or verification of residency, the ability to obtain a Social Security card. DRT is able to engage public and private stakeholders to develop and implement a process enabling homeless individuals to apply for the free Guam ID. So I have a question, though. If some of these are not changed in the legislation, for instance, verification of an address or verification of residency, how is that going to happen if they're homeless? Bless you. How is that? So I have a question to the author of the bill. What was her findings, and what was some of the comments made regarding this Section 2 of the Department of Revenue and Taxation on verification of address and verification of residency?
I apologize, Senator Titagwe. There was an inquiry in the floor. Senator Torres, do you wish to answer at this time?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I will so yield. With regard to the issue about cost, Department of Revenue and Taxation, through their director, Mrs. Shimizu, was giving a cost estimate assuming that every single homeless person on Guam, by their count, comes in and applies for a Guam ID. So $19,000 would be the maximum impact if everyone were to come in over the course of 1 year. Ms. Shimizu also noted, however, for the record, that she didn't think that that $19,000 was going to be an issue, that it could easily be absorbed. And perhaps she understood the benefit that can result of this versus the impact of the max of $19,000 to DRT. With regard to barriers, other barriers that exist, Madam Speaker, I'm well aware of situations in other agencies like the Judiciary of Guam that has rehabilitative programs within the court system, programs designed to reintegrate people into the community, where the barriers to additional costs, for example, the cost of obtaining a birth certificate, arrangements can be made from agency to agency for waiver of those fees at the discretion of the director. And most recently at the Society of Human Resource Management conference, of which I was a panel presenter alongside the Lieutenant Governor of Guam and the presiding judge of the courts, they talked about this very issue. Is there are many barriers that exist. However, all of the interested parties can and have already addressed on a case-by-case basis how to apply waivers where it will allow somebody to get a birth certificate to then apply for something. Bill 126 will not cure homelessness on Guam, but Bill 126 is a great first step at removing a major barrier that can give people either hope or despair, and that is a valid identification. With regard to the proof of residence, Bill 126 requires DRT to permit alternative verification to establish proof of residence. And it does this by allowing applicants to provide documentation from a homeless or other social service providers that would certify the individual's homeless status. Currently, there are 18 states that allow homeless applicants to submit an affidavit or certification of homelessness status as proof of residence. In many of jurisdictions, letters from homeless shelters attesting to an ID applicant's local residence are used to establish residency. And there are several ways that we can do this, and that's why I propose that we extend and give DRT more time. Bill 126 is strategically drafted to leave that decision to DRT, to allow them to collaborate with Guam's service providers to determine the best fit based on their service infrastructure and our population's needs. So while there are concerns and comments, I believe that Bill 126 not only addresses who a homeless person is by tying it into the McKinney Homeless Assistance Act definition of what a homeless person is by federal statute, and it also follows very good examples that are currently trending across our nation. So let's not be afraid, Madam Chair. I'm not afraid to be progressive in this regard.
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate the
Thank you,
opportunity to comment.
Senator Titagwe, that answers you. We're still on the amendment
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I can assume that this section of requiring for residency can be done and through administrative direction, through changes within revenue tax to bypass any requirements needed for residency, if that's the case, because I don't want us to see us coming back into this hall and having to create legislation that allows the Department of Revenue Tax to, because if I'm not mistaken, the Real ID, this is done through federal guidelines. And if it's done through federal guidelines, do we have to get those approved by the federal government?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, you want to say something?
No, I just want to caution you, we are on the amendment for the 180 days enactment, so I just want to
Oh, I'm sorry,
share
ma'am.
with you that I know as you were continuing to state your testimony, it looks like you're speaking on the main motion, but I'm on section 3. So I just want to make sure that this is in reference to section
Yeah,
3.
No, actually, Madam Speaker, it's not. I thought that we were setting aside until the amendment was printed out and distributed to our colleagues.
Right,
And
so
that we were
wait,
going to speak
so-
on the main motion? on
No,
the
we
bill?
were still speaking on the
Okay.
amendment, so that's why I'm asking you to
Okay,
please
then-
make sure that you know that we're just on the enactment first.
Okay, then, Madam Speaker, the question was asked and answered on that one section,
Right,
but
so I'm
I'd
going-
like to reserve my time for the
Yes,
main motion.
definitely, I just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure. On the amendment,
Okay, I'd like to
Senator
reserve my
Castro,
time.
you're
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the amendment, I rise in support of the amendment. I think it's a reasonable change to the bill. It addresses the issues of validation. Given the experiences in the village and the mayor's office, Madam Speaker, we know that most mayors, at least the mayors I've interacted with, it's very seldom, it's rare that they do not know who their residents are. So I have confidence in the mayoral system. Also, I want to encourage my colleague and the agencies who will be participating in articulating how to establish alternative forms of validating their residency. We all know that the public school system can serve as in loco parentis, and so these school officials or the school itself or the district might be in a reasonable position to provide verification of at least residency within the village. It's rare, Madam Speaker, unless, and I'm no expert, unless there are issues of abandonment or unaccounted for childbirth that in my opinion, on this small island, we don't know who each other's kids are. I think somebody, whether it's the school system or the mayor's office, can establish that alternative form of identification and residential validation. So again, on the amendment, I rise in support of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Anyone else on the amendment on section 3? If Senator Briscoe-Lee, you are recognized on the amendment.
Buenas, Madam Speaker. On the amendment, I just rise in support. I think it's important that the author, the proffer of this amendment, had mentioned that this gives DRT additional time, but it also gives our stakeholders additional time to be able to provide their input. And it's really important to note that we all have to work together. This is a multi-prong issue, and we need to come at it with a multi-prong approach and ensure that we are really doing our best to meet the needs of this population and, in fact, all the people of Guam. And if it's going to alleviate some of the concerns of DRT and the concerns of some of our stakeholders, we need to make sure that we give them the time to make sure we do it right the first time. So I rise in support. Tidus
Tidus
Masi.
Masi, Senator Jean Briscoe-Lee. Anyone else? On the amendment, Senator Therese Chirlahi, good morning. You are recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. I think it's a good addition to the bill to accommodate the Department of Revenue and Taxation's concerns and to allow them to get ready so that this program can really be implemented full force without any hesitation. And it's my understanding that this proof of residency means they have to prove that they've actually been on Guam for 30 days. And so I agree with the sponsor of the bill that we should be progressive in this regard. If a social service agency who we rely on to service, provide the services and the care for these people, we are relying on them so heavily, and the Department of Public Health, if they can certify this in any way, I say we take their word for it, that they've been on Guam for 30 days, and we move forward with that. And so I think it's a good amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Situs Masi, Senator Therese. Anyone else? If not, to the author of the amendment, Senator Mary Torres, would you like to close or just ask for the motion to proceed?
I just want to bring up one point, Madam Speaker. This bill is not Real ID compliant. This bill is the most basic of identifications that we are establishing for homeless people so that they can begin to get their foot in the door towards being in a position of gainful employment or getting assistance.
Thank you, Senator Torres. On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries. On the main motion, Senator Joseph Augustine, I will recognize you.
Excuse me, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Good morning.
I rise in support of the bill of its intent. But to make any comment that the Guam ID is not real ID, in a couple of months it will be in full effect. They're applying that today, the real ID, not unless Revenue and Tax is going to say that they're not in compliance with that. I mean, they do offer the option, either you want to be real ID or not. I know that. I know that for a fact. They're giving you that option.
Senator Augustine, just because of your statement, I'm just going to take a moment's recess so that we can just work on this. I'll take a moment's recess.
Thank you.
Imina 35 na legislature ng Guahan is back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you're still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just want to maybe clear up the air in reference to the real ID. At the Department of Revenue and Taxation, you do have an option between real ID and not real ID. But let's make sure that everybody understands and the people of Guam understand that the requirements for an ID or driver's license is the same requirements you need to get a real ID. So either you choose to have a star on your driver's license or ID so you can enter a military installation or get on a plane, and if you happen to arrive in Hawaii and you want to continue flying without using your passport, it behooves you to have a real ID, which is available in Guam. What I was trying to get to, actually, other than the Guam ID, is more, what is the population of the homeless? How many are from wherever? And the reason why I ask this is because, many folks at the airport would tease sometimes is that, what's when there's a storm coming? Because all of a sudden we got plenty of people arriving. But nothing to be discriminating. But we also have, if you find here on Guam, we have a lot of, and I'm a retired, we do have some retirees that are homeless. And I've approached them and asked them, why are you homeless? He goes, because I don't want to have a bill. And I'm like, come on, man, you're a retiree, you can afford it. It's not about that. They love to do what they're doing. And every 6 months they get on a hop and they fly off, then they come back and they're homeless. And I'm only concerned is, what are the numbers we have? How many people are from wherever? Because when they go to the process of identifying that they're homeless, I'm only concerned is that if we keep on wavering, then we keep on waiving costs. Sure, 19,000 is not an issue today. But what is it going to be tomorrow and forward? That's only I wanted to know. And if the author would yield to that question, what is the numbers we got? How many
Thank
are
you,
from
Senator.
wherever?
I'll
Thank
pose
you.
that as an inquiry. Senator Torres, I don't know if you have the actual numbers, but would you like to yield to the question on the number of homeless and the breakdown, if you have it?
Madam Speaker, the statistic that I'm citing is from the Guam Homeless Coalition's 2019 point-in-time count, where they actually go out and assess the homeless numbers. The number that this Homeless Coalition came up with in 2019 is 765 individuals. The composite of that wasn't available to me, but as of now, that is the number that we're dealing with, 765.
Senator San Augustine, does that answer your inquiry?
No, what I
It
was
was
basically,
lower from the previous year.
well, I understand where the number's coming from. I was just concerned, how many are Chamorro? How many are whatever? And the reason why is because yesterday we just discussed about the foster kids, and we're going to help them. We're going to help them also get a Guam ID. But how many are whatever? I'm just curious to know that number. I think the people of Guam like to know, what are we dealing with on Guam? Is the population going to boom on homeless? And then we need to know how we need to counter that.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Do you have a point of information on that, Senator Taitsino, or on the main motion? Senator Torres, there was an inquiry about the actual breakdown. So if you don't have the numbers right now, is there any way that you can afford the committee to get the numbers to bring it back to the body?
I can make inquiry, Madam Speaker. I do have a breakdown from the testimony on the demographics of the foster children. That was available to me, the previous speaker.
And if you can read those numbers just to make sure, if you have those numbers right now,
I'll look for it immediately.
you're more than welcome to read it at this time.
I'll look for it, thank you.
Okay, Senator San Augustine, I know you still have the floor on the main motion. Did you want to reserve the time to come right back and see if she gets the answer?
As soon as the answer is available, if it can just be available to all our colleagues, and then otherwise, I'm in support of the bill in general.
Cesar Masi, Senator San Augustine. Anybody else on the main motion? Senator Kelly Marsh Taitsino, you are recognized.
Saina Maasi, Speaker. I rise in support of the bill, and it was important to me, a couple of aspects of it. First of all, speaking to the humanity of it. And it was important for me to look up the definition which the author of the bill had placed in the bill itself, which was very helpful. It was important to me to look at that definition of homeless, because there are a variety of people in our community that are really struggling. There are stories that are so important for us to know. There are those that may just be living under a canopy. There are those that are living out of their car. There are those living in shelter just placed together out of old doors or old pieces of rusty tin and so forth. And so the intent of the bill, as I understand it, is to uplift these people who are struggling at levels that most of us cannot comprehend. I am one of the people that when I was growing up did live through some years of homelessness. And I understand these struggles very well. So when we're talking about the humanity of this, when we're talking about uplifting others, we're not only talking about adults, but we are talking about the children who are part of this family, perhaps, that did not ask, and it is not their choice or ability to control these situations. And we as a community have to muster up our care about each other and to help lift each other up. As the author of the bill had mentioned, there are these obstacles, and I know them, as I said, very well. Life is so much harder when you are homeless. And in the definition of homeless that is mentioned in the bill, it mentions that these are places not designated for or ordinarily used as sleeping accommodation for human beings. That they may even be in a shelter, they may be imminently losing their housing. But if you look through the definition, each situation are those that are probably just at the last of anything that they can provide or find some provision in. So it goes beyond maybe what we think of just standard homeless, and that was important to me because a lot of people are living in this substandard housing, as I mentioned. And I wanted to make sure that this addressed that. For those living in such situations, it may seem insurmountable to be able to get themselves on their feet, to get out of that situation. And getting an ID may be something that actually helps them do that. There are success stories out there. This is not just something that's empty. I know people that have gotten themselves out of homelessness. I have been part of a family that got themselves out of homelessness. And not only that, if we are helping them be a success story, then they have the potential to be contributing back to the community, having a job, having a place to stay, having a healthy family, getting their children to school, succeeding at school, all of which contributes back to our economy, all of which has the potential to contribute back to what really boils down to a minor cost. And I don't take the cost of a program lightly, especially at the time that we're in. We are looking very, very closely at the budget, and so I just want to mention I take none of that lightly, but this is a program I feel we have to support when there are those living and facing challenges that most of us do not truly understand the hardship of and the lack of humanity of. So I commend the author for this, and I give my support to the bill. Sedus Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator Marsh Teichner. Thank you so very much. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Amanda?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning. Good morning
Good
to our
morning.
colleagues. Yesterday, we spoke about the need for stability when we were talking about helping our foster youth. And today, this is another bill that moves our children in need and our youth in need towards stability. So I rise in support of this bill, and I thank the author for offering this to help our homeless youth. Proof of identification is essential for many of the things that homeless youth need as they get on their feet, including getting a job, finding housing, food assistance. It's also often needed to obtain other forms of ID and trapping youth in a very difficult cycle. Unfortunately, the requirements of getting an ID, a driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, or other identification document differ in each state and territory and can be challenging to navigate. For runaway or homeless youth, they're already likely disconnected from their families. It can be especially tough. According to the National Center for Homelessness and Poverty, 54% of homeless people without photo ID were denied access to vital services, to food stamps, to shelter, to housing services, to Medicaid and other medical services. And as one of our colleagues mentioned earlier, this can place another financial burden on us at GMH when we're not able to bill homeless people or these homeless youth who go in for service. And when we can't allow them to register for other services such as food stamps, this is preventing our people from taking advantage or availing of federal aid and turning to other local funds. So these IDs for homeless individuals, especially for our youth, helps all of us really. And as we continue to work towards solutions for fighting our homeless problem overall and finding solutions to the underlying issues, this is a step in the right direction to help now. So I again thank the good author, and I ask to be added on as a co-sponsor. Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sedus Masi, Legislative Secretary Shelton. Senator Therese Chalaye, I will recognize you now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and I want to commend the author for pushing this forward, even though there is a little bit of testimony, or we may not that we have all the answers, but I think it's important that we move this forward today as soon as we can because of the situation that Guam is actually in. It's very clear that we are in a crisis when it comes to homeless, and it's probably the number one calls that we received, especially when I first became a senator. Everybody wants to know, what can I do about those children on the corner? What can we do about these families? Obviously, they're families. What can we do? What can we do? Why are they not in the shelters? And we've pursued this, Madam Speaker. As you know, we've searched for the answers at the shelters. The shelters have been at maximum capacity consistently. There is no more room in these shelters. So that's one of the issues. Another one of these issues is some of these individuals or families are refusing to abide by the shelter rules. And some of the issues are what the author is trying to solve here. Some of these individuals are just not able to avail themselves of the services that can be provided because of things like an ID card. And this, I know the number one intent of this bill is to allow these people to get employment. And that's going to hopefully move their lives and the lives of their entire families. So I believe it's a very good measure. I think it's we have to, there are certain other requirements. It's only really taking care of one of the requirements to get an ID at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. It's taking care of the residency requirement, two. And the second is the fee. So waiving the fee, I think that's huge, Madam Speaker. If they are homeless, and we've devised a way for them to kind of certify that they are homeless, and if that's the case, then waiving the fee, it's going to cost the government money at this point, but if they are able to secure employment after that, Madam Speaker, I think it's a very good investment on behalf of the government, that it's going to really help us. Otherwise, we put millions and millions of dollars into shelters, permanent living places for these people, but we're trying to get them employed and at least resolve that. I think we all know we've got transportation issues to deal with that would help them to stay employed. And I think that, we still have the Homeless Coalition, the shelter people, the workers, so many of our government of Guam agencies have done so much work and really do provide a lot of services. It's really just a continuous real focus on even when it's not easy to continually try to help the homeless families. It was the other things that Department of Revenue and Taxation are requiring for an ID, we're not resolving with this bill, but we may need to take a look at. But those are also very difficult. If you have never been in the system, Revenue and Taxation is going to require a Social Security card. And that, as we know, because many of us have had to go get another Social Security card or, get a copy of it from Social Security Administration when we needed the real ID, that is a huge challenge to. But if you're new in the revenue and taxation system, that's required. And I think if you've already been in there at any time, then hopefully they can assist you with that. But and the other thing is a birth certificate. And so if they are from Guam, a birth certificate, I think that's maybe something that the legislature might have to take a look at also, letting them get their birth certificates from the Department of Public Health. Getting them from anywhere else, I'm sure, is just an additional challenge that these social workers, case workers, and everybody involved is really, I know some people in the Homeless Coalition who've, spent their own money, or they pull money to get, to pay the fees so that this person can get their ID card and things like that, just to get them through the system when they seem to be intent on working, on helping themselves. I appreciate Revenue and Taxation and Gura's testimonies. I thought Gura gave very good testimony, very practical, and those are just things I think that we're going to also have to look at. He's suggesting that we reduce the number of required original and certified documents needed to apply. And so we're talking about the birth certificates and the Social Security cards. But we will have to discuss that further with revenue and taxation. But I do agree with at least moving on these two areas, the fees and the residency, proof of whether you've been on Guam for 30 days. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's perplexing to a lot of us to think of you can move to Guam, declare your residency, be here for 30 days, and you're pretty much covered by all, you can get covered with these services. But the fact of the matter is also, Madam Speaker, that really the #1 homeless population on Guam remains to be the Chamorros. And it's I don't know what to say. It chokes me up because, of course, there are many factors that are contributing to this, and we have many challenges that we need to resolve. But, it's changing. So they said, according to the homeless count in 2018, they've said that since 2017, the number of identified homeless Chamorro individuals from Guam has decreased by 9%, while the number of identified homeless Chuukese individuals has increased by 39%. So there may be increases in other populations. However, the numbers were 337 Chamorros homeless, 290 Chuukese. You can combine all the other classes of people and they wouldn't, I don't think, or they might get close, but all of them combined are I think less than 200. So I think, I'm so grateful to the Homeless Coalition and all the volunteers who really work on that count for us, because it should be what helps us to focus on where the solutions may lie. It's there was a total. I just noticed because I was looking at it that the total of, we talked yesterday about the 294 children who were homeless. So they have it also broken down by ethnic background, age, and even which village. And Jigo is by far, I didn't even know that until today, that Jigo is by far the #1 village where homeless are residing, or what they call it their residence. But I just wanted to read this one more thing out. Oh, yes. Okay, so the total under 18, actually, according to this one, is 361. Under 18, 294 unsheltered. The total between 18 and 24 is 76. The total over 24, and that's a huge group, but that's 854. I'm sorry. The total over 24 is 417, and I just wanted to show that the number of adults homeless and the number of children homeless, those aren't that far apart. It's almost, 361 compared to 417. I just keep thinking about that, Madam Speaker. So I think it is a crisis, and so I appreciate this bill, and I'll leave it at that, Madam Speaker, and I thank the author for her efforts to promote this.
Haguma, Senator Therese Chalahi. On the main motion, point of information, Senator Castro.
Just as a point of information, Madam Speaker, the retiring speaker was referencing, if she didn't already say it, the 2018 point-in-time count report produced by GURA. It's available on the GURA website. And since I have the floor, I just want to highlight also from the same report as a point of information on page 11, actually to the previous speaker, it should be noted for the record, he raised a very legitimate question. But I also want to restate the statistics that were previously read out. It's 4 years in a row that the Chamorros from Guam have been the highest numbers of homeless persons, whether sheltered or not sheltered. So I hope that answers the previous speaker's question. But I also want to highlight, for the sake of the Committee on Veterans Affairs, Senator Chalahi, Senator San Agustin, and myself, of particular concern that the body should be aware of is that there are homeless veterans, Madam Speaker, homeless veterans, 43% of whom are Chamorro, or identify as Chamorro. That's found on page 11 of the same report. Thank you so much.
Situus Masi, Senator Castro. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Torres, you may close. If no one else wishes to speak on the main motion, I called Senator Torres to close.
Pardon me, Madam Speaker, I was yielding to the most elder of our group
That's
out of
perfectly
respect, the way
fine.
our culture tells us.
Thank you.
But as a follow-up, we did disseminate the 2018 point-in-time count report, the analysis, so everybody should have a copy. And also, further, as I alluded to with the foster children, you asked me to give that breakdown. Of the 198 foster children that public health testified to in their custody, of the foster children, 198 are Chamorros. The remaining are 49 Chuquis, 13 Filipino, 6 African American, 4 Palauans, 2 Pohnpeians, 3 Yapis, and 1 Caucasian. But Madam Speaker, I want to thank everybody for their input and consideration of Bill 126. And I'd also like to move to place as co-sponsors on this bill, in addition to Senator Shelton, Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, Senator Will Castro, Senator James Moylan, Senator Kelly Marsh, Senator Joe San Augustine, and last but not least, Speaker Munya Barnes.
Masi, Senator Torres, on that motion, without any objection, motion carries. And to place it to the third reading voting file, Senator Torres. Senator Torres, to the third.
And I move that it be placed on the third reading file.
Thank you, Senator Torres. On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 11:45. Senator San Augustine.
Madam Speaker, I ask that we move to recess until 2 o'clock.
Thank you. We are in recess till 2 o'clock.